I feel like a lot of people don't realize that they know this game, and many more think it's a copy of Tetris. So to be blunt, Puyo is not a Tetris ripoff. It's actually based on Street Fighter. Its reskins, most notably Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, are pretty well known, which is really why Puyo itself isn't, but it also appears a few times in other Sega games. So if you're one of those people who got walled in Chemical Plant Zone because you didn't know what you were doing, this video's for you. Before even getting into the game, we'll be met with character selection. This is entirely cosmetic in the standard rule set, so feel free to pick whoever. Despite being a very simple game, Puyo is surprisingly hard to learn. I'll explain as best as I can, but you'll probably need to get hands-on for things to make sense. To start, you have a puzzle board and pairs of Puyo made of 2 random colors. If you create a group of 4 or more same colored Puyo, they will disappear and anything above them will fall. If another group of 4 Puyo connects after this, they will disappear, creating a chain. Basically, it's a gravity-based color matching game, with your main goal being to create as high a chain as possible. Quick side note for those with color blindness, modern Puyo titles have color filters available. Those are Puyo Champions, Tetris 2, and I'd imagine Puzzle Pop, but I can't confirm that one. Now before we get into making chains, I want to cover some common terms I'll use throughout this video. Remember these, you'll be sick of them by the end. I've mentioned Puyo, but you'll also commonly hear them referred to as just pieces. There is a slight difference, as piece usually isn't used to refer to Puyo that are already on the board, but that's getting a bit pedantic. Links are collections of adjacent same-colored Puyo. Pop and clear are interchangeable terms to refer to when linked Puyo disappear. Chains, I've also mentioned, are the main focus of the game. They're when Pop Puyo cause the new links to form. Earlier, I said that Puyo is surprisingly hard to learn. The reason for that is chaining. It's just a bit weird, and there are a lot of small things to pay attention to. It's also hard to teach, not only because there's a lot of small things to pay attention to, but also because of differences in people's playstyles. There's not exactly a correct way to do anything. That is to say, to properly teach chaining would require mentoring, which I can't do in a pre-recorded video. And covering all the problems people could run into would make this video absurdly long. My advice would be to keep it simple and slow in endless mode. You can change your handicap setting to sweet to make pieces fall slower and reduce the colors that Puyo can be from 4 to 3. Your goal at this point is just to build the mentality of making chains, so don't feel like you have to follow the standard rule set. For learning, try to start at the end of the chain and slowly build links. For instance, we have some greens in this corner, and here I'll put some reds on top of them, then another green on top of that. By popping the reds, we've made a 2-chain, and by repeating this, we can make a 4-chain. If you're practicing while watching this, I would suggest pausing the video and playing around with chaining for a bit. Once you generally understand it, and can be mostly consistent with small chains, come back and continue. If you've seen any mid-high level Puyo, you've probably seen someone get a massive double-digit chain, and you're looking to do that yourself. What I've taught so far is good for learning and passable for low-skill use, but you'll very quickly run into problems with RNG. If you're playing along while watching, you've likely gotten a few pieces that were wasted, or you had to maneuver your chain in some weird way. While this is usually fine at low skill levels, the better you get, the bigger a problem it becomes. Dud pieces are not just wasted pieces, they're wasted space too. And you aren't going to be getting super impressive chains with that, not without a lot of luck. So how do we consistently make big chains? While in theory you could just have 1,000 IQ and make big chains in your sleep, for most people that's not going to work. So we use something called a chaining pattern, or just pattern for short. It's exactly what the name entails, a repeating sequence of Puyo. Their purpose is to minimize the amount of improvising and wasted Puyo by building in, well, a pattern. That might be vague, so let's look at an example. This pattern is called stairs. It's a simple one that many people start with. These 3 blues are stacked in one column, with a stack for greens next to it. We then put another blue on top of the greens, then repeat. This will be cleaner than just winging it, and after a while, you'll start to build in patterns automatically. However, if we simply go across like this, we will quickly run out of space. So, we need to get to the second floor, and for that we need a transition. There are many ways to make a transition, but let's start simple. We can just cover these greens with 3 blue Puyo and put a green on top of them, which allows us to chain on the second floor. Just remember to put a Puyo here to link to the Puyo in column 2. But wait, if you look at how the transition starts, it sets us up to continue building stairs. But wait again, there's a problem here. Do you see it? These greens on the second floor link with this green on the first, breaking the chain midway through. This form of break we call a cut. So how do we prevent cutting? Well, you could just play a little slower or keep better track of your chain, but we have a much simpler option. Just use another pattern. The sandwich pattern is good for this. Also just good in general. Sandwich is an extremely versatile pattern, and when I say extremely versatile, that is no exaggeration. You just have to make this general shape, like this is sandwich, this is sandwich, and this is sandwich, and this. Point is, we can use sandwich to make it less likely that there's a cut in our chain, because we can compare Puyo to the ones directly beneath it, rather than those in adjacent corners. The main draw of sandwich is its versatility, because not only does it have a lot of forms, but most of those forms can be combined. Problem with that is learning it, as sandwich is only going to be reliable if you know how to mix its forms. Of course, sandwich isn't exclusive to the higher floors, nor are stairs exclusive to the lower ones. And there are more patterns, but these are just the common ones, and they create a good basis for using patterns. It's also important not to be reliant on patterns, as at high levels there are a lot of disruptors that will get in the way, and you'll need to be able to go off the rails. But that's something to practice later. Now, we've been learning how to chain consistently, but we haven't talked about why. You see, while we've been playing solo mode so far, this is not Puyo's main game mode. Puyo is a competitive game, as in typically, you will play against an opponent. In a Puyo match, your goal changes from just making a large chain to making your opponent top out by covering this X on their board. By making chains, you will send garbage Puyo to your opponent, which will fall from the top of the board. Any guards that drops will take up board space as a garbage Puyo, which can only be cleared by popping a colored Puyo next to it. Garbage will be placed in a queue until 2 conditions are met. First, the attacker's chain must end. If someone sends a 6 chain, garbage from the 1 to 5 chains will wait until the 6th chain link pops. After the chain ends, the garbage falls when the defender places their next Puyo. Garbage Puyo drops in rows, so 2 garbage Puyo can't randomly fall in the same column, and only 5 rows can drop at a time. If the defending side uses their own chain, they will first attack their garbage queue, offsetting it. If the defender's chain is stronger than the attacker's, then they will counterattack and send any excess garbage back. This is where chaining becomes important. Every chain link sends an increasing amount of garbage. For example, the 6th chain link sends 54, and the 7th sends 74. which will stack on top of any garbage that is in the opponent's reserve. This means a single large chain will be stronger than 2 smaller ones. You should be extra aware of 5 chains, as they are the point at which a chain sends enough garbage to always cause a top out if not offset. So big chains are important, and we want to make those chains as efficiently and quickly as we can. So let's get into some small techniques that we can use to help with that. First, we have to talk about how the rotation system actually works. Every piece has an axis Puyo that the other Puyo rotates around. For example, this red is the axis, so when you rotate the Puyo, only the blue will move. When a new piece spawns, the bottom Puyo is the axis. We can use this to be slightly more efficient with some pieces. For example, because the axis Puyo is the bottom one, by rotating twice, we can move the off-axis Puyo from above it to under, letting us place the piece slightly faster. That one's not too useful, so let's talk about kicks. There are 2 types, floor kicks and wall kicks, which both use the fact that trying to rotate into a filled space will push the axis Puyo away from it. We can use wall kicks for an easier way to quickly reach column 5 by rotating the piece into it, then rotating the Puyo to the position we want. We can use floor kicks to climb Puyo in the row above by having the axis Puyo on top, rotating in the opposite direction, moving, then rotating back. Or just spamming rotate. Being able to climb is already pretty useful, as it lets you fix mistakes before they become a problem. But it also allows us to access the hidden row. There's a 13th row outside the visible board that can only be reached by climbing. This is very useful as we get a bit more leniency in chaining. Puyo don't link well in the hidden row, and anything beyond it is instantly deleted. Well, that's a lot of information. Basics of chaining alone was 4,000 characters, excluding spaces. So let's take a breather here. You might have noticed that I've actually already made this video about a year ago, so why make it again? Well, mainly, I wanted to see the difference in editing and scripting, but also, that video's audio just sucks. Now, I have a few videos that I could also redo, so why start here, especially when the Tetris video was my first. The Puyo video gets watched more. Anyways, it's about the point in time where I do the spiel. These videos take a lot of time and effort to make, especially with the art. As simple as they are, it still takes a while to get everything right. So I'd appreciate if you liked the video. While on topic, I use a few different styles for the drawings, and I'm still playing around with what they should look like. I'd appreciate y'all's thoughts on that. Let's talk about how garbage actually works. You'd probably assume it's just based on chain length and pop Puyo, but no, it's actually based on score. I'm warning you, this part is some nerd shit and it isn't required to learn, so there's a timestamp if you want to skip it. Chain score is determined by this equation. The start is simple, but these variables need some explaining. The chain power is a predetermined set of values. It seems like a lot, but it's pretty simple. It starts at 2 chain with 8, it doubles until it reaches 32, then increases linearly. Due to the chain power doubling until the 5th link, 5 chains will almost always beat anything below them. And even when countered by something lower, the damage will be smattering. The color bonus adds points depending on how many different colors are popped simultaneously. Popping 2 colors adds 3, and each additional color doubles that. The group bonus adds points for additional Puyo popped in links. For the first extra Puyo, you gain 2 points, and gain 1 more for each Puyo after, until there are more than 10 Puyo, where it caps at 10 points. While these values sound small, remember that the left side is 40 minimum, so even having 1 extra Puyo in a 1 chain will earn you 80 points. We then take the chain score and divide it by the sum of target points and leftover points, then round down. Leftover points don't really matter to us. They just carry over anything lost in rounding into the next chain link so you don't lose any potential garbage. Target points, however, are very important, as they're what determine the score to garbage ratio. At first, the target point is 70, meaning every time you score 70, you will send 1 garbage Puyo. A funny byproduct of this is that because dropping Puyo gives score, if you reach the target point this way, you'll send garbage the next time you pop a Puyo. And we're not done with target points, as they're part of another mechanic called margin time, which exists to prevent matches from becoming the Sisyphus experience. Margin time is a timer that reduces the target point. In a normal match, this takes 96 seconds. When it is first hit, it will drop the target point by 25% and begin activating every 16 seconds. Each time after the first, it'll halve the target point, stopping when it's either undergone 14 iterations or the target point is 1. Also, the target point is always reached by 10 iterations, so I don't know why there's a limit of 14. This means a lower score to garbage requirement. For example, at base target points, it takes 2100 points to send 30 garbage. After the first margin time, 2100 points sends 40 garbage. And of course, at 1 target point, we'll send 2100 garbage. If you're curious, that's equal to a normal 18 chain. Alright, now let's get back to stuff we can do instead of the inner machinations of the game's mind. Let's start with hanging. It's just when you place a piece with one side hanging off, so it will fall when it's placed. However, we aren't able to do anything until the falling Puyo places itself, which can slow you down a surprising amount, especially if you do it constantly. Avoid this when you can, but don't sacrifice your chain's power for it. Next, power chains. If you watch the whole scoring and garbage calculations, you might remember that the garbage sent depends on how many Puyo were popped, and you get a bonus for popping multiple color Puyo at once. If you skip that part, that is something that matters. This means by simply having extra links of Puyo at the end of our chain, we can greatly boost its power. In fact, it only takes about 2 colors and 1 to 3 extra Puyo to overpower a chain that's 1 higher. Additionally, because of their lower Puyo requirement, they can be built faster, and because there's 1 less chain link, the chain ends faster. And yes, that does matter. Remember, garbage doesn't fall until the chain ends, and we can use that to our advantage. Let's say you have an 8 chain and your opponent has a 10 chain. If your opponent sends that, you have about 10 seconds until the garbage falls. That is to say, you have about 9 seconds to extend your chain to beat theirs. You'll see this commonly in competitive Puyo. People will send small harassment chains, more on that later, and try and force their opponent to use their chain. Then use that time to make their chain strong enough that their opponent doesn't have the resources to beat it. Off that remark, let's talk about advantages. You see, Puyo is a snowballing game, which means that it's easy to push an advantage once you have it, and conversely, hard to get back if you fall behind. What I just mentioned is a Puyo or piece advantage. By having more resources, you're more likely to win. Real epiphany, I know. The only way you really get this advantage is by using the time that your opponent's chain is active to extend yours. Contrarily, there is chain advantage, where one chain is just so much stronger that it's improbable that the opponent can extend to beat it. This one's very rare, you'll only really see it at low levels since chaining's the fundamental skill in Puyo. Next, space advantage. Because the board is 13 by 6, or 78 total spaces, and links require 4 Puyo, you don't have much room to spare. Even a few garbage Puyo can limit the power of your chain, and if you're facing an opponent who isn't facing that problem, you can end up just not having enough space to beat their main chain. Lastly is a trigger block, where the link that starts the chain, or the trigger, gets buried under garbage and the chain can't be started. This isn't exclusive to the trigger link. If you can force a break or cut in your opponent's chain, that works too, but the trigger's the easiest to keep track of. This is the strongest advantage because being unable to use your main chain leaves you extremely vulnerable. So much so that a block trigger can basically immediately decide the match. You may have realized that half of these advantages are due to Garbage Puyo taking up space. So let's talk about how to deal with that. The first part of garbage management is digging, where the Garbage Puyo are already on the board and you have to dig through them to reach your chain. This falls heavily on improvisation and chaining logic, so I can't really help with it. The second part is being proactive and creating a counter chain by stacking vertically to move the trigger to a place where it's accessible after taking the hit. You'll see this very commonly in all clear starts. People will build high up so that when their opponent uses their all clear bonus, the garbage sent is used as scaffolding to reach the trigger. Because some advantages can just win you the match, getting one is extremely strong. Naturally then, the question is, how do we make an advantage? And which advantage do we go for? Well, take that second question and throw it at the nearest wall full force, because we can go for all of them at once. Harassing your opponent is a vital part of competitive Puyo. Don't take that out of context. I already did that joke last chapter. If you're not able to consistently make chains of 10 or more, do not start working on this section yet. Chaining is the fundamental skill of the game. Without it, a good opponent will just outchain you and it will be really embarrassing. I mentioned harassment chains earlier, but didn't explain them. Harassments are small chains, usually 2 to 4 chains, that are meant to disrupt your opponent, usually either by forcing them to set off their main chain or blocking their trigger. But even if they fight back, you can then try to get them to sacrifice parts of their main chain or waste their space. Basically, harassments do everything you could want them to. But they're also where learning becomes hard again. The easiest form of harassment is one built separate from your main chain. However, using pieces on side chains will be detrimental if you can't trigger them. Instead, it's smarter to use parts of your main chain, namely the early links, so you can merge the harassment into the main if needed. This is all a lot easier said than done, though. It's also important to know that sometimes you shouldn't use harassments. If you're better at chaining than your opponent and they're not using them, then just outchain them. Don't overcomplicate it. Also, power chains come back here. Remember how they're fast to build and clear while doing a good amount of damage? Yeah, that's real good at being disruptive. Just make sure to be careful when sending harassments, as they still take time and resources. If your opponent sends their main chain at the same time you send a harassment, you could lose a lot of time in Puyo that could have been part of your main chain. So then, knowing how our opponent plays and what they're doing is important. And given how strong harassments are, knowing if your opponent's sending a 3 chain or full 13 is very important. This leads us to Puyo's hardest skill. When it comes to observation, the statement "easier said than done is an understatement" is itself an understatement. Because observation really is just look at your opponent's board. Observation is about observing, who would have guessed? Sound easy enough? Well, let's talk about what that actually entails. First, look at their main chain to get an approximation of its length, and if there's any breaks or vulnerabilities. Then look for any harassments or anything to defend themselves, and also look at their upcoming pieces to see if they can quickly trigger anything in response to attacks. Also, you have to do this while still playing yourself. I'm sure that first remark's becoming real clear now. I'd also advise paying extra attention at the start of a round in case your opponent uses a Hellfire, which is an all or nothing power chain, as a Hellfire connecting will put you far in disadvantage. And that's really it. Again, it's looking at your opponent's board. What else am I supposed to teach you? Techniques to stare harder? No, that is not an offer. Some last things I want to mention. First, practicing. Puyo has a CPU that you can play against. Its difficulty depends on which character it is, and generally the lower a character is on the menu, the stronger they are. The CPU is a fine opponent early, but it generally gets worse the better you are. Once you start using observation and harassments, I'd say it becomes detrimental due to the ways that it cheats, such as inhuman reaction times or seeing upcoming pieces that a player can't. I'd also point you towards Puyo Nexus. I use it as a resource for some parts of this video, and it also has a tutorial for starting that mentions some things I haven't, like color decisions. It's also just good to have things described in multiple ways. The site has a chaining simulator, a wiki, and a gallery of each character's appearances throughout the series, so you can go and look at the best character ever designed anytime you want. And I would have said it even has Draco on the front page and made this joke, but in the middle of doing the voiceover, they changed it after 10 months. That is to say, I'm pissed. Lastly, I've recently started streaming on the weekends, at around 1 PM Mountain Standard Time. Sometimes here, sometimes on Twitch. Come drop by and chill sometime. Like, seriously, please do. I am not enough of a yapper to talk to myself for 2 to 4 hours.